Well, hello everybody out there and welcome to another random video. And in today's video I want to talk about this really stupid and annoying debate between analog versus digital. Which one is better? I mean, this debate is just so downright stupid and I just want to put an end to it. You see, the thing is, first of all, it is very hard to make a really good, fair comparison. I mean, you shouldn't make the mistake to think, ooh, a fair comparison would be a comparison between a record and a CD. That's not really a fair comparison because this doesn't really represent the full capabilities of either one of these formats, or how do you say it, analog and digital. A real fair comparison would be a comparison between an analog master and a digital master, which means that you would have to record the same music with analog recording equipment and digital recording equipment. And I'm not talking about home recording, I'm talking about real professional studio equipment, the best that you can get. And yeah, if we would compare that, digital would be better, because what we're talking about is sound reproduction. And when it comes to sound reproduction, it's all about accuracy. And digital formats, or digital, is capable of a more accurate reproduction. And there are a lot of stupid people out there using a lot of downright stupid arguments. For example, one argument that I keep hearing over and over again is the argument that analog music sounds better and more pleasant because our ears are analog. And this is just complete nonsense, because I think that you picture those different kinds of waves. You think about those nice, smooth, round analog waves, and then you think about those digital square waves, and you think, well, if those digital square waves are going into my analog ear, it kind of irritates my ear, and that's why it sounds less pleasant. But I don't think that anything is really capable of creating real digital sound waves. Well, maybe a Tesla coil or a plasma speaker, but think about where the music comes from that you listen to. It comes from a speaker. And how do speakers generate sound? Through vibration of the membrane. And this vibration is a purely analog movement, because hardly anything in the physical world can move in a digital fashion. So yeah, speakers are only capable of generating analog sound waves. So what else could it be that you're talking about? Are you talking about the signal, or I don't know what you're talking about? Because let's just compare, let's just take a look at two different examples. So let's say I'm using a CD, which is a digital format, and I'm listening to it, but I'm using the analog output of my CD player. And so at this point, the digital music or the digital signal from the CD is being converted into an analog signal. So does it sound better? Does it sound warmer or more pleasant because it's now analog? No, it doesn't. So I have a digital source but an analog signal, and it still doesn't sound more pleasant. But if I have a digital master and I create a vinyl record from it, all of a sudden it sounds more pleasant and it sounds warmer, even though it was also a digital source. It also comes from a digital source. So why is that? Well, it's because every analog format changes and alters the sound. That's just the way it is, because it's a physical format and it physically changes the sound of the music. And another thing that people always think, they always think about digital and they think, okay, digital means yes or no, 1 or 0. There is nothing in between. But with analog, there are basically entire worlds in between 1 and 0. So therefore, many people think that analog music is quote unquote infinite. But that's not the way it is. Yes, normal analog sounds, if we talk about normal analog sounds in our surroundings, yes, they are infinite. But when it comes to analog formats, there are physical limitations because those are physical formats. So therefore, they can't be infinite. And there's also technical limitations. There are limits how much music, how much sound you can actually capture and record, and how much sound you can actually reproduce. And with digital music, there are also technical limitations, but there are no physical limitations. There are no physical limits as to how good the quality of the music can actually be. I mean, let's take a look at a CD, for example. We know that the CD is usually 16-bit and 44.1 kilohertz. But that's not due to physical limitation of the CD. This is just the standard that we agreed on. That's the standard that we just came up with. But it's still possible to put a 24-bit and 96 kilohertz file onto a CD. So there is no limitation. Yes, most CD players won't be capable of playing it, but it's still possible to put higher quality music on a CD because there are no physical limitations. But it's not possible to put better quality music on a certain amount of tape, like a Type 1 Faro tape on a cassette. There is only this much music that you can put onto this kind of tape. So if you want better quality music, you need a better quality tape. So if you say that you like analog music and that analog music sounds more pleasant, you aren't talking about the actual analog music. You talk about the way how analog formats change the sound. And this results in a better or more pleasant sound. That doesn't mean that the sound is actually better. It just means that it's probably more pleasant. And you also have to remember that it's impossible to listen to analog music without listening to the format as well, because every analog format creates a sound of its own. No matter if it's surface noise or tape hiss, you can listen to a record with a completely empty groove and still hear that it's a record. You can listen to a cassette and still hear that it's a cassette. And this is something that you have to remember. So if you have music and you record this music on an analog format, the format changes the way how the music sounds because it's a physical format, and the format also adds its own sound to the music. And apparently many people find that more pleasant. That doesn't mean that it's actually better in terms of quality, but it's just more pleasant. And I also believe that the format is also always part of the music. And there is certain music that only sounds right, or that only seems right on a certain format. That's just the way it is. And I know that there are many vinyl releases nowadays from video game soundtracks. And I'm talking about Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis soundtracks. And in my opinion, this is just downright stupid. What's the point of that? What's the point in taking purely digital 16-bit music and putting it on a vinyl record? What's the point of that? It just doesn't make any sense. And you have to remember that when it comes to accuracy, digital music is just better because there is nothing that changes or alters the original sound. There is nothing that adds an extra sound to it. And you also have to remember, with digital music, you don't have things like wow and flutter. So therefore, in theory, digital music is just better. Yes, if CDs sound terrible, because it's not because it's digital, it's because of bad mastering. And it's because of things like the loudness war, which results in very, very terrible dynamic range. That's just the way it is. And you also shouldn't make the mistake to think of a CD as the pinnacle of digital sound reproduction. You know, we are way past CD quality right now at this point. And I know there are many people out there who think that it's downright stupid to purchase analog music and then to digitize this music and listen to the digitized version instead of the original format. Because then those people think, well, what's the point in purchasing an analog format if you digitize it? Why don't you purchase the digital version? Well, because in some cases, some music only exists on a certain format. I have many music that really only exists on cassette, for example. Or sometimes the record is the only way to get the music on a physical format. And I prefer purchasing my music on a physical format. And you know, what you have to understand is that the typical warm analog sound doesn't go away by digitizing it, because the warm sound hasn't been created by the fact that it's analog, it has been created by the format itself. And this sound doesn't go anywhere. So if you listen to the digitized version, you basically have the best of both worlds. You have the convenience of a digital sound file that you can copy as many times as you want. You can listen to it as many times as you want without lowering the sound quality. And you still have the nice typical vinyl or cassette sound that you like. So yeah, I think it's really good to digitize analog formats and listen to the digitized version. And you know, I also record my music on mini disc, so there you have it again. I have it on a physical format. But what I don't understand are people that digitize their records or cassettes, but then they try to remove everything that makes it sound so great. So there are people that try to remove those pops and clicks from the record. I don't do that unless there is a scratch on the record and there is a really loud pop that is really distracting me from the music. Of course I remove that, but everything else I leave that in. And I also don't understand people that record only on Type 4 metal tapes and only with Dolby as noise reduction because they want the cassette to sound as good and as clean as a CD. What's the point of that? What's the point of that? In my opinion, it doesn't really make that much sense, because sometimes it's nice to hear where your music comes from. And you can only do that if you hear this little crackling and if you hear the little tape hiss every now and then. And personally, I don't mind that most modern day cassettes are only Type 1 Faro tapes and that they have been recorded without any Dolby noise reduction, because I was born in the German Democratic Republic. So I know how bad and terrible cassettes can sound, because the cassettes that you can buy back then, they just sucked. You know, those are the kinds of cassette that many people would refer to as Type 0 tapes, or maybe even Type -1, because they sounded so incredibly terrible. There was a lot of tape hiss, you know, like the fifth copy of a cassette. That's how much tape hiss there was, and it sounded so incredibly dull and muffled, as if you listen to your music with pillows wrapped around your speakers. It sounded awful. So when I listen to a normal Type 1 cassette recorded on a good cassette deck, it sounds absolutely fine for me. I don't have any problem with it whatsoever. So this is just something that I just wanted to get off my chest. I just wanted to clarify that analog music doesn't sound better or more pleasant because it's analog. It just sounds more pleasant because of the way how those analog formats make the music sound, how they change the music, how they change the sound, and that in theory digital is better because it's more accurate. And yeah, that's it. So let me know in the comments what you think about this whole analog versus digital debate. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, and I see you in the next random video. Bye.